The meeting at 7:04, and we have transmitting of the Treasury warrant number 35, 35A, 36, and 36A. Is there a motion to accept?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Selectman Newhouse, second by Selectman O'Connell. All those in favor? It's unanimous, and thank you. Approval of minutes of December 16, 2013, January 13, February 3rd, and February 10th of 2014. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve the 4 sets of minutes as described.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Motion made by Selectman Shampoo, second by Selectman Newhouse. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. Our appointments at 7 o'clock. It's the public hearing, acceptance of streets at town meeting, Eleanor Drive. And right now, I'll turn it to the town manager. Thank you.
Yes, there was a little bit of a mix-up from the last meeting. In fact, the last meeting was just to preview, if you will, the streets that would be considered for acceptance, and it turns out there was just one, Eleanor Drive. This evening is really intended to take any comments that that people may wish to make about the consideration over acceptance of this street, and then to close the public hearing, and then to entertain a motion for further action at town meeting.
Okay, very good. All right. All right, where this is a public hearing, first I'll go to the boards for any comments, then I will go to the audience. Any questions from the board? I mean, I know we'll call for motion in a moment, but, all right, where this is a public hearing, I will go to the audience. This is a public hearing relative to what the town manager had just expressed. Any questions? Anybody from the audience? All right, let it be known, we went to the audience and there's no questions or comments. All right, right now, if there would be, I would entertain a motion that the Board of Selectmen close the public hearing for street acceptance.
So moved.
Motion made, is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Selectman Shampoo, second by Selectman Samaglia. All those in favor? And it's unanimous. All right, now, I would entertain a motion that the Board of Selectmen accept Eleanor Drive for further action relative to the acceptance of a street at the annual town meeting on May 3rd, 2014. Is a motion to that as described by the manager? Is there a second? Second. Motion made by Selectman Samaglia, second by Selectman O'Connell. All those in favor? Unanimous. All right, thank you. Okay. All right, Joe, that's good enough?
Yes, I would just recommend that for the purposes of the process, the board will need to sign the Mylar map, and we can do that at the close of the meeting.
All right, that's what we'll do at the end of the meeting, so we won't delay any of the residents here in attendance this evening. All right, very good. 7:10, let's see. Well, it's, is it a public hearing? No. I mean, I could take 7:10 right now if he's in the audience. If you want to, is Guy Neal here by any chance? Miss Neal, if you want to take a seat. Guy Neal, Tavern LLC, doing business at Red Heat Tavern, request to obtain a common victual license for the property located at 300 Lowell Street. Good evening. How are you?
Good evening, Chairman, Town Manager, Selectmen. Thank you for having me here this evening.
Right now, obviously it's a public meeting right here at this here. I just want to make sure we're doing it right. There's a public hearing. No, obviously it's just to discuss the common victual license.
Yes.
Right now, I'll turn it to the town manager. And
Thank you.
before the board. Thank you.
With respect to recommendations, I have a recommendation or comment from the building inspector. He advises that there are no zoning issues. The health director, Shelley Newhouse, indicates I recommend approval of the application for common victualer's license for BGP Tavern LLC, doing business as Red Heat Tavern, Burton's Grill LLC at 300 Lowell Street, subject to meeting all the requirements of the Board of Health. So it looks like we're good to go.
All right. It's favorable as far as the town hall is concerned. Is there any, would you like to make any comment on that?
We're on behalf of the ownership and Red Heat Tavern, we're very excited to be part of the town and be part of the community. And we've been so well received by the town, and we want to be good citizens and good community members. And we've been trying to do our part in charities and fundraisers, even to the point where we've been hiring local hockey players, football players. We're trying to do our part to be really good citizens in the community, and we thank you so much for the opportunity to be in this wonderful town. Thank you so much.
And you can convey to the owner that he was here with Mr. Peterson. I said I look forward to going, I went not once but twice to your restaurant, and I thought it was outstanding. I thought it was very good. So
Thank you.
I just want to let you know that. So I turn it over to the boards. Any question, comments, or motions?
I make a motion, we grant the request for the victor's license.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Second. Motion made by Selectman Semaglia, second by Selectman O'Connell. All those in favor? Unanimous? Good luck.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
you.
All right. I could go right to this agenda.
Yeah.
Is Kathleen here? Black? Good, how are you? Why don't you come up to the seat? All right, Kathleen Black Reynolds, Chairman, Wilmington Historic Commission, relative proposed demolition of the Whitfield School.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of the Historical Commission, thank you for scheduling us on such short notice. I'd like to start by introducing the members of the Historical Commission. To my left here is Bonnie Smith. I almost called you Bishop. Steve Lawrenson in the front row. Former Chair of the Historical Commission, Carolyn Harris. Jerry Duggan in the second row. Diane Harvey. Kim Nien, she's one of our newer members. We have our clerk, Patricia Cottarelli, and our curator, Terry McDermott. And missing is Bob Mallet, thank you, who's flown himself down to the Caribbean for vacation. So we wish him well. We were going to Skype him in, but we figured we'd better not. So again, thank you again for recognizing us and having us here this evening. Obviously, for most of you, you've heard my spiel. I did manage to speak with just about everybody on the board, with the exception of Mr. McCoy. And Terry and I met with, and Kim met with town manager a week ago regarding the Whitfield School and the potential demolition. So our plight here tonight, obviously, is to persuade you to allow the building to stay standing. We'd like to do that at least for the next year, to allow the feasibility study that town manager has proposed be done on the municipal buildings in town. We think it's a very reasonable request. The building's been vacant for quite some time now, and here we are. It seems that this came up rather urgently or abruptly, and we don't think that asking for another year's time is unreasonable. There are a number of historic features to the exterior of the building. It, at the time it was built, around the 1880s into early the 1900s. It was completed in 1904. It was a very progressive building for its time, with the natural lighting and the classrooms in the front of the building, and the fact that there were just 4 large classrooms to accommodate the students. And also it allowed for the boys and girls to enter and exit from the same doorway rather than separately, as had been done prior to this building being built. It's also the last remaining early 20th century building that we have here in Wilmington. The architect himself deserves some recognition. He was a very well-known architect in the Boston area, born in Milford, had several other schoolhouses just like it built across the Commonwealth. We're not quite sure if some of them still remain, though we do know that one was dismantled and resurrected in another area and serves as an office building for a local developer. And the namesake itself, the Whitfield School, that's probably the most famous part of the building. As you may or may not know, George Whitfield was an evangelical teacher in the area, pre-revolutionary period. If you read some history books, he's mentioned right alongside Ben Franklin, George Washington, some other very notable men. And we believe he's buried in Newburyport, Massachusetts, actually, so we'd like additional time to look into that. So his story is that he was in Wilmington trying to spread the word of Christianity and teaching of democratic principles, and actually did so across the street from where the Whitfield School stands now, under what was eventually named the Whitfield Elm, which you probably know is on the Wilmington Town seal. Oh, there it is right there. Perfect. And later on, there was a monument erected in honor of Mr. Whitfield, but it's gone missing. We have talked with the owner of the property where the Whitfield Elm used to be, and he didn't realize that this man existed and that there used to be a plaque for him, and he is talking about maybe erecting another plaque in his behalf. So that's kind of exciting for us. Eventually, the grammar school was built, and it kept his namesake, which we think is rather significant. In talking with each of you, I got a sense of some common themes that ran through your arguments. One of them that came up was the safety of the building, or when people are around the building, that there are some concerns for their safety. And I know that the roof is in disrepair, and we've known that for some time. I'm not aware of any shingles falling off the roof or off the side of the building. Unlike the Swain School, where there was clear evidence that the brick was crumbling and falling from the building, I'm not aware of anything like that. I think, Mr. Manager, you mentioned this at the last Selectmen's meeting, that the heating the building and ensuring that running water is going through the building is done at a minimal cost. Another concern that came up from a couple of select members was that this conversation may go on for another 10 years. And I understand that concern because it has happened with other historic buildings in the community. That's not our intention here. Our intention is to reasonably request a year's time, allow the feasibility study to be completed on the other municipal buildings, and include the Whitfield as a priority. Make that the first building that's considered and looked at and evaluated, and allow us the time to assess whether there are funds, state funds, town funds, to help in the revitalization of the building or the rehabbing of the building, or perhaps maybe there's a private developer too out there that the town may consider selling the building to, but retain ownership of the property itself, and allow the use of the green space for sports or passive recreation or what have you. We're simply asking for an opportunity to explore possibilities. As you know, we're a town volunteer board. We've worked hard over the years. We've had a very cooperative and I think collaborative relationship with the board. This board and boards past, I've been on the commission or involved with the commission for about 16 years. There are several members who've been on for many years, and there are some new members. So we have some new members that we need to educate. We have some board members that we need to educate, and we have a community that we need to educate about the history of the building and potential uses for it. We took an oath to preserve and conserve the historic resources in town and to educate the community about those resources, and we're simply asking for additional time to do that. We're only doing our job. We're doing what we took an oath to do. And we feel that putting this before the town at this year's town meeting is a rather hasty decision, and it doesn't give us ample time to do that. And we're simply asking for additional time, and we're happy to entertain any questions, and we'd like to stay around and listen to your comments if you have any.
First of all, I appreciate that you being here this evening, and I know you made comment that you were able to touch base with everybody with the exception of myself. Unfortunately, we did play phone tag.
You're
You
right.
called me at least on 2 occasions. I returned those calls
You
twice,
did.
so unfortunately, we weren't able to connect. And I know at one time I had brought something of this up at one time when you were talking about the budget, and I know Mr. Newhouse brought it up about a week ago, the last meeting or two ago. And obviously, I've lived in community for 54 years, and I've driven by there many a times, and I know there's nothing really going on with the property, and I know that it's in need of desperate work. And obviously, I did express my feeling, I'll say it now before I even talk to the town manager, that, you know, I do believe that we need to address the issue. I don't see it, I see it going to the town meeting. I believe it should go to the town meeting, let the people of town decide the fate of that. I did bring that up, that I was in favor of it being brought down. I have not swayed my decision from that at all. I just think it would be to the town's best advantage economically that if we did tear the building down, because I know it's in disrepair. I know there's a lot of money that has to be involved in to bring it back to, just to bring it back where it is right now, just for the sake of it from water damage or to, I know Mr. Hooper's in the audience, he could speak more of that. And obviously, I'd like to, you know, turn it to the manager right now, get his input, then obviously to the board, and I would probably expect to go to the audience. And I'm really glad that you're here to talk about it.
Thank you.
And once again, I think it should go to the town meeting, let the town meeting decide it's, you know, whether they want to keep it or not, you know,
And we
obviously-
don't disagree with that.
Yeah,
We
'cause-
just don't want it to go to this year's town meeting.
Yeah, no, I understand, you know, it's just like.
It definitely needs to be a town decision, and we're happy to have the debate and.
No,
what
I
we'd like-
appreciate that. And once again, I can't see spending thousands and thousands of taxpayers' dollars to something that eventually we're going to tear down, if that's what it comes down to. And I'm not shy to say that. I think that we need to tear the building down. I think we need to move forward. I mean, there's other uses that we could probably use the property. I'm not saying it's going to be another soccer park, but obviously it's a valuable piece of property in an area. And once again, I've driven by there many times, and nothing's gone on with that building. I know at one time the police department used to store materials there. Now we obviously have a state-of-the-art safety building, you know, and obviously I've said enough, and why don't I just leave it to the town manager right now, and I'll open it to the board. Thank you.
Well, as the board knows, in my budget presentation, I did not, include any money or proposal to tear down the building, my thought was to do a comprehensive review of the town facilities and really try to develop a game plan, so to speak, of what the priority of needs are with respect to town facilities, and try to establish an order of addressing those issues. So whether it be the long-discussed substation for the fire department. Clearly, I think we have some space needs at the senior center. The town hall is another building that I think it served its purpose. It was supposed to be the temporary town hall back in 1985. It's been it's served us well, but I think we need to begin to look at a building that incorporates not only general government but the school admin. Clearly, the Roman House, while that building certainly has historic features, is just not conducive to a school administrative building. So I would, my thought is to try to have some kind of a combined building. But those are all just, my own thoughts. So the intent of a feasibility study would be to try to have someone who has some expertise in laying out a program work with us to do just that. The challenge, obviously, is that the building is in tough shape. George Hooper has indicated that the roof in particular, has a number of leaks. George and I have been over there, and it's clear if you go up on the second floor, the ceiling in many places has the plaster has fallen. You can see the wooden slats that remain. It's unclear how much longer the roof can sustain the kind of condition that the rain and snow and so on that we've had. But I guess that's what I would say at this point. That I think the feasibility study may assist us in terms of making a determination as to whether the building has any future purpose for us. I think, quite honestly, just preliminarily from information that we have gathered from an architect, the estimate, and this is just ballpark, they would have to go in and do some serious review, but the ballpark estimate is $3 to $5 million to upgrade the building to a point where it met accessibility standards. There's issues of meeting the current seismic requirements, plumbing code, electrical, all of those issues would have to be addressed. Beyond that, the first step really in addressing it is just having an architect come out and do an assessment, which the estimate we have is $15,000 to $20,000 to do that. Once an assessment was done, if the town elected to move forward, then again, that assessment would presumably give us a better number as to the cost, on top of the $3 to $5 million that may be the cost at this point. Because of the procurement laws, we would have to hire as part of the project an owner's project manager. So there would be a fee associated with that. So, there would be significant costs to bring this building back to a place where perhaps might be suitable for an office or something along those lines.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other questions comments from the board? I'll start with this side.
Thanks. I get some rambling thoughts. Kathleen, you made the point that the building has been vacant for a number of years. Do we know how long it's been? I think someone did. Was it 80?
2005 or thereabouts was when the public buildings relocated from that space to the former fire station. So I'm not sure how long Public Buildings was there. I came here in '87, and they were in that building at that time, so certainly a fair period of time.
Okay. The exact number isn't important for what I was going to say, which is effectively that it's been vacant a good long time. Mr. McCoy said a few weeks ago, we should take it down or whatever. And I know it was a conversation that we all sort of bought into. And when Mr. Newhouse brought it up for, let's consider whether or not we can review this and maybe get it on the warrant for consideration for this year. I will be completely candid and frank with everyone here, and Kathleen, you and I had a conversation. I am of the feeling, with what limited information I have and limited knowledge both of construction as well as historical significance, that all being said, I still think the building probably ought to come down. I'm not a fan of the building. I think it's somewhat of an eyesore. I think there's some safety concerns, et cetera, et cetera. I'm also dramatically concerned about some of the numbers that are coming back. Again, the very, very 30,000-foot view of some of these budgetary estimates that are being put together for refurbishing of the building to bring it up to current standards. Nevertheless, all of that being said, I wish that I had the presence of mind back in the spring or the summer to bring to this board's consideration what Mr. Newhouse brought to us was it last meeting, or whenever it was that you suggested we ought to put this on the warrant? Because then there would have, I believe, had been enough time, justifiably, for the Historical Commission to do the homework that you're kind of now asking for the time to do. I think at the end of all of this, we'll still end up at the same place with the same conclusion. That's my personal feeling here. And had we or I put this out on the table for discussion and consideration, we would have been able to go through the process through the summer, and we'd be sitting potentially at this meeting right now signing a warrant that includes that article for the town to consider. Again, I feel pretty strongly that no matter what the feasibility study that the town engages in through the course of 2015, 2014 into next year, that at the end of it, the recommendation will come from all the parties that the building doesn't merit the investment necessary to bring it up to standards, that it's not historical enough, or all the other things. And, maybe I suspect that there will be an argument made to the contrary, but I think I will come down at the end, whether it's at this town meeting or the next one, voting in favor of taking the building down. That all being said, I believe that you should have the time to do your homework. And I don't believe that the month and a half that we have given you is enough. So I'm going to vote not to preserve the building, but rather to let that building continue to be a part of the stock of town-owned properties that is included in the assessment that we put into the budget for the, $20,000, $15,000, $15,000 to $20,000 overall assessment. I believe at the end of that assessment, I'll be here saying, let's take the building down. But I read this, I listened to your argument, and I feel like it's not an unreasonable request to ask for a little bit more time. So that's my position on this.
If I can let the town manager speak before I go to the next slide.
Just to be clear, Selectman Shampoo, the 15 or 20,000 that I was referencing is not a number that I've included in this budget. That is a number that the architect that we consulted has estimated. If he were asked to go in and advise us as to what the cost to rehab this building, his cost would be $15,000 to $20,000 to give us a report back that says, here are the issues that need to be addressed. Here's an approximate cost to deal with that. What I had done, if you recall, in the budget that I presented, was to suggest an amount of $150,000 to do a comprehensive facilities study, and that study would include a look at most of the town buildings, obviously with the exception of the new high school and the middle school, but take a look at our facilities and then begin to address where we need to focus our attention next.
So I kind of misinterpreted, and I appreciate the correction or the specificity of the 150. I guess I interpreted that the 15 to 20 was a portion of the total 150 that would be kind of allocated, for lack of a better word, that would be seen as the Whitfield slice of that one total 150. So it doesn't really matter. It doesn't change my argument. I guess at the end of the day, that you recommended and I support the article for doing the overall assessment, including, admittedly, the current existence of the Whitfield as it stands. The fact I started by saying that, it's been there an awful long time, I don't know, I don't know to what degree. This is the thing that I want to make sure I get across, and I didn't get it across a moment ago. I don't think we need to necessarily rush headlong into the idea of taking the building down. On the other hand, I don't want to go beyond the next town meeting. I guess some sort of date specificity here. I don't want to have, as Kathleen said, I don't want to have this conversation again next year and the year after and the year after. I really believe that this is important enough that we need to put draw some line in the sand and say we can't extend this out any further. So, while I'm willing to be malleable on this particular town meeting, that flexibility goes away for next year. So, again, I'll leave it at that. I don't have questions. I guess I just wanted to articulate my position on it.
Thank you, Mr. Shampoo.
Yes, thank you. If I could just, first of all, thank you very much for being here, and I know we had an opportunity to speak at length while we were on the phone. I actually was able to drive to the building while we were on the phone, which was actually helpful.
Appreciate that.
Certainly, I have similar concerns to what have already been expressed. I know I've articulated those to you over the phone, which is that, in my opinion, I see, aside from the record keeping, that the building has been essentially in a non-status for the town. And I have not seen or heard, and I say this respectfully, not directed at this board, but just in a general sense, that there have not been any plans to revitalize the building and bring it, re-energize it and revitalize it and reinvent it into something other than the status that it is today. That concerns me. Capital improvements being invested in the building to have it stay in a non-status, I feel, is not a productive use of tax dollars. I certainly can appreciate the concept and the request for time. I feel that in the end, the cost model is going to be exponential, and it's going to be difficult to meet the standards that it's going to need to bring it back to what it is. Certainly, I'm an optimist personally and professionally whenever possible, but I'm also a realist as well. So we get down to the concept of time. I'd like to just ask the manager, if I may, in addition to the $150,000, what are your immediate plans in the next year to spend money on that building, if at all, in addition to just the heat and water? Were you planning on, just remind me about, was the roof going to be
Yeah.
done? Does it have to be done right away?
I was not planning to do the roof. The estimate that we have to do the roof is $42,000. One of the things that kind of we get put into a difficult situation here, because the building is in very difficult straits. It's clearly the roof needs to be replaced. So do we put $42,000 into a roof when there's no clear purpose for the building at this point? We do have some limited amount of records in there, but as a practical matter, those could be moved to another location. I'm sensitive to the idea that, given the fact that taxpayers have seen the impact of the high school project, my sense is that there's not an inclination in the near term here, within the next probably 1 to 3 years, maybe 5 years, to do any major building construction. So my guess is, if all goes well and this feasibility study is approved, that the best case scenario is we're talking at least 5 years out for any kind of building activity to happen. So.
Okay. And if I could direct it back to you, Kathleen, and to your commission, can you expand a little bit? I know you touched on it in your beginning statements, that What do you feel the activities over the next year would be? You know, what do you feel that you would do as a group to, how would we benefit from giving you the additional year?
Thank you, I appreciate that. Well, there's been some discussion about the town putting the money or not being able to allocate funds to rehab the building or revitalize it or maintain it. We would explore other revenue possibilities. We could consult with private developers, we could consult with grant providers. Granted, no pun intended, most of the grants require matching funds, but there may be some out there that don't. So we have a curator, and she's phenomenal at exploring grant opportunities and actually grant writing. And we've had some conversations with some private developers already in the short period of time who expressed some interest in it. So we'd like to get them in the building. Maybe we need to walk around with the architect and Mr. Hooper and get a better sense of what they feel can or cannot be done, and bring that to Mass Historic New England. Terry McDermott and I are actually meeting with representatives from Historic New England and the architect for the Butters farmhouse on Wednesday. So we'll bring the issue to them as well and get their sense of what possibilities are out there for us. I know the town is not interested in being a landlord and renting the building, and that's why I suggested perhaps a private developer come in and purchase just the building and the parking area, and the town retain the green space and be able to do what they want with the green space. I believe when the library discussion came up many years ago, there was discussion about incorporating the Whitfield School or even using the Whitfield School as part of a new library. Other towns have used similar buildings for their senior center and expanding the building so that there's senior housing attached to it, and the building itself becomes almost like a community center for our seniors, and then the seniors could use the green space. So I think there are a lot of possibilities. Now, whether it's revitalized in the space that it's in or bringing it back to the early 20th century appearance, that might not be the only option. I actually sent Selectwoman O'Connell an article on a similar building designed by the same architect that was deconstructed and rebuilt somewhere else. And so that's a possibility. There's not a whole lot of historical features similar to that other building, but there are some that could be reused. I've also heard, so that's what we would do. We would like to be able to do that, explore some of the other possibilities. The other thing I want to mention, because this comes up every year when the commission discusses its budget. We probably have the smallest budget of all the boards and organizations in town. And we're aware that these buildings require capital improvements, but we don't have the money in our budgets to maintain these buildings. We just don't. So our job is to bring the attention of the needs of some of these buildings to Mr. Hooper and to the town itself, and then the town makes the decision of what they consider a capital improvement or not. So if we had our way and we had the budget, we would have an annual statement as to what we believe needs to be maintained and worked on, and we would pay for it as best we can, but we just don't have the funds in our budget. So we rely on public buildings for that, and it's a struggle, you know. So that's what we would do. We have a number of options that we could explore.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Karen, thank you for coming here tonight and explaining your commission. I see they're all here. What have you done as a commission for looking into that building? Like in the past 2, 3, 5 years, has there been any kind of studies that you have done on your own as a commission on the Whitfield?
We, in 2005, thank you, we had grant money to bring out an architectural historian, and she came out and she did a survey on the building, and that's something else I actually provided to Selectwoman O'Connell. And I certainly will provide copies to the rest of the board. So she did a historic survey of the building, and she did it with a number of other buildings in town. And the survey is done for the purpose of nominating a lot of these buildings or districts to the National Register of Historic Places. This building is not on the National Register of Historic Places, but it's part of the state's inventory. So it's on the state's inventory. Anybody can access the information online. So we had a historic survey done on it. So we obtained a lot of the historical features and narratives of the building through that. In October, Terry McDermott and I met with the town manager, and at that point, he had said to us, me mostly, as chair of the commission, to try to prioritize what the historic buildings needs in the town are. And we started a conversation at our commission meetings, and we knew the Whitfield was a hot topic, and we knew the Roman House was a hot topic, and we know the Bazell Senior Center is going to be a hot topic. So we're aware of some issues. And then in February, we met as a commission at the Whitfield School, and we toured it. As I said, there are a couple of new members on the commission, so we have to educate them. And we went through it, and Mr. Hooper was there, and then within a week, you guys had your meeting, and discussion of the building coming down came up, and we were stunned, to say the least. In addition to that, we have been focusing on the Butters Farmhouse. So just as the town has been focusing on the new high school project, we've been sort of putting all of our resources into the Butters Farmhouse. So, but in terms of the historic survey, we've done that. We've reached out to some community members about their feelings about the Whitfield School. We continue to research the architect and the nomenclature. So it's on our front burner, and it has been. But in terms
the
of
historical review, what you just said, that doesn't say the actual like structural integrity of the building. It's just the historical part of it. I guess my point is there hasn't been any real action other than the historical side of it, which is real. I mean, structural part of it in many years.
Mm-hmm.
And as we've discussed, it's empty. It's not being really used for anything other than storing some records. Now, when and if this goes to town meeting in a couple of months, you'll be able to express your concerns to the town as well, and maybe come up with the historical review and all the information that you've gathered on that, and maybe, the discussion will go. I guess what I'm saying is, in my head cold type of way, is I would be for bringing it to a town meeting, knowing full well that you all will have your opportunity to explain your side and your concerns for the building to stay as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's it, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
You did good.
So if I may, Mr. Smaglia, was that a campaign for us to have this discussion at a town meeting that's not fiscal year 15? Perhaps we have this discussion a year later at town meeting?
Well, I guess my point is this has been, it's been on your front burner, and you have obviously some arguments to bring in front of town meetings, so why not 2 months from now, or a year from now, or 5 years? I think 2 months from now, you have some information that you can pass on to the residents.
We have some historical data, but in all due respect, it's not enough time to educate the community on not just the historical features of the town, of the building rather, but what other uses of the building could be. And I think we deserve that. I really do.
Thank you, Lou. Mr. Nunes?
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that we should put it before town meeting and have this discussion with the voters. And certainly there are arguments for and against. It's not all that many articles like this that go up or down by unanimous vote. I mean, there's always different points of view. But I find some of the information that we have compelling, and I find my own observations of the property to be compelling. I mean, if we're talking about a feasibility assessment of $15,000 to $20,000, just to figure out what it would take for an estimated design cost and construction, but we're having an architect that's estimating $3 to $5 million to renovate the building, and that doesn't include the soft costs associated with a project like that, which would include a design team and an owner's project manager. All of that taken in the context of the manager's comments earlier about his opinion as to the appetite of the town, I happen to share, but in any event, if this design and construction couldn't occur for another 5 years, now I think there is the time really is costing us money, both in terms of assessments, in terms of what the cost of demolition might be, 3 to 5 years from now, if that's ultimately the direction we take. And then I'm one of the folks who is looking at this with an eye towards public safety as well. I mean, the comment that I had made at a previous meeting that I stand by is that currently the property is used for field space, and I can picture soccer out there. I'm not sure if lacrosse is still there. I'd have to check with the manager. But I drive by on a Saturday, and the property is filled with cars and filled with people, and there's adults and children alike going back and forth using parking across the street. I see a very real, tangible need for the additional space, number one. I see a safety factor in terms of families crossing and using privately owned property across the street, and I think that warrants, some sense of urgency. And, I think that folks at town meeting can decide in weighing that out against what information could be forthcoming in the next year if we decide to put it off a year. So I hear some of the comments that are saying, and perhaps I should have started at the beginning of my comments. I share what's been articulated up here, that, I appreciate the work that the commission does. I'm glad that we have folks who take their charge as a commission seriously and bring this point of view to the table. But I think it's one of a couple different points of view that deserve to be brought to town meeting. And I do see a downside to waiting, whether it be the public safety issue or just the fact that I personally, in my heart of hearts, have a hard time believing that I'm going to be swayed by information in the next year when we're looking at these kinds of numbers, albeit estimated numbers, that there's a real value to putting that off. So I'm prepared to include it in the warrant tonight when we take a vote. And if the majority of the board sees fit to do that, then, prepared to have that further discussion at the Finance Committee hearing and at town meeting. If it doesn't go that way, then, I'd be a member of the board that continues to try and work with the commission and hear you out. But I don't want to, I think I used the expression when we talked briefly, I don't want to blow smoke at you. I've become convinced in the wisdom of putting this before the town at this time.
Well, I appreciate everybody's candor, and if I can just address 2 points that you made. Mr. Manager, I just want to clarify, there is a difference between $150,000, $15,000 to $20,000 for an individual plan or feasibility study just on the Whitfield, but the $150,000 includes the Whitfield School, correct? So you'd only be spending one set of dollars.
Right, well, the 150 will not, whoever we hire will not go into that building and do a full-scale assessment of what it would cost to bring that building back to a state of being usable. The 150 is really intended to look at all of the various buildings, more from a town-wide standpoint, and, in consultation with the town, I'm sure they'll have some preliminary suggestions or recommendations as to whether they believe the building might be viable to use for another purpose, but their main focus is not going to be assessing that particular building, where, if we hired an architect just to go in with the goal of telling us what it would cost to bring that to a habitable state, that's the 15 or 20.
Okay, so in the warrant article, there is a request for allocation of funds up to $150,000 to do an overall assessment of all the municipal buildings, correct?
Yes.
And it will include the Whitfield School?
It would.
It would. And I guess my other point just goes to the safety issue. I've lived in this community for 19 years. I know I'm not a homegrown Wilmingtonian, but I've been here quite a while, and this town's been very, very good to me and my family. I work in North Reading. I travel Route 62 a lot. I shop at Eli's. I go down that road indiscriminately. I don't just do my grocery shopping on Saturday mornings. I do it whenever I need to do it. And quite honestly, I haven't seen the traffic or the safety issues that has been raised here tonight in private conversations that I've had with you. In addition to that, my kids participated in youth sports. They have a lot of money. They can hire a cop as a detail to help people cross the street if that's really what's needed. And I agree with Mr. Shampoo that the rear of the building is not Wilmington in its best light. It definitely isn't. But there is some integrity to the building, to the front of the building, to the historic features. Our request for additional time to educate the board, educate commission members, and educate the community is not unreasonable, and simply to do it by town meeting is just not, it's not reasonable. We couldn't do it. And it wouldn't be fair to the commission or the public to have to do it in such a short period of time. Mr. McCoy, I don't know if that wraps up the board's comment time, or if there were additional questions or comments.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I know there's members and former members in the audience. Love to hear their comments. I mean, obviously, I don't mind have a problem with the discussion, but I will go with the board first. I'm happy to talk to everybody, obviously. Mr. Shampoo?
Yeah, I have a follow-up, two follow-up questions that occurred to me during the conversation. One is, if I may, address Mr. Hooper directly. George, in your professional opinion, do you feel like the roof can be Band-Aided or done nothing to for 12 more months? Do we have to do something to the roof to keep the building from falling in on itself?
Well, it's not going to fall in on itself. All right. No one's mentioned the two stacks that were up on that. We've actually brought them down below the roof line because the bricks were starting to just fall off in place. All the mortise needed to be repaired. The roof is leaking. We patched up over that area, the whole back of it, and I'll put it as, when we were up there doing that, it was brittle like potato chips. I couldn't give you the exact age of that back part, but the rain's coming through it. That's not helping the structure at all. The previous administration, with the previous town manager, I discussed this with him, and we were trying to determine if we were going to have a use for this building, how much are we going to spend? And the cost to do this over the years has just increased. The other thing we haven't really spoke about is the material. The siding that's on there is ACM, it's asbestos-containing material. And I've gone out to do budgetary numbers, and over the years, it has just increased exponentially. When I had received the first quotes, I was looking at it. I was looking at like $35,000 to get rid of it. Now I'm looking at $50,000 to do it. So, and that's in a very short time frame. I presented a number, just a budget number to take the building down. It was just about $100,000. Now we're looking at $150,000. That's in a short time frame. The roof is leaking. And if it was your home, you'd have it replaced. If it was any building that was being used, it would have been replaced a long time ago. It is in need. It needs to be done. Water gets into these buildings. In the wintertime, it freezes, and then it thaws out in the summer. That gets into the structure of the building, and that's what you're facing. My opinion was, yes, you have to put a roof on this. If we're going to save this structure at all for any use, it needs a new roof on it. And the number that the manager gave you of $42,000, that doesn't include any replacement of roof joists or rotted boards underneath. There's a very small allowance there for that. I don't expect there to be. I've been inside the attic. I've seen it up inside there. I don't expect a lot of that, but to answer your question, yes.
All right, let me be more specific maybe. If this article hadn't come up, if we weren't discussing the possibility of putting before the town meeting this year the possibility of demolishing that building, would you have put in a request for budget to replace the roof?
We've talked about this every year. What should we do with it? No, I wouldn't put it in there.
That's an important statement. I appreciate that. Maybe this is for the town manager more specifically. If and when the town does vote, thank you, George, I'm sorry, I didn't thank you, I apologize. If and when the town does vote to demolish the building, we wouldn't need to wait 5 years to demolish a building. We could act more swiftly to do demolition than, I think the 5-year window was like, we don't want to start to talk about construction or new development or anything for some extended period of time. But if we eventually vote to demolish, we could move into demolition within the next 12 months after that vote is taken. Is that a reasonable?
Yes, I mean, it would, certainly if there was a vote to demolish the building, then we would put out a invitation for bid, similar to what was done with the Swain School, and look to have the building addressed, relatively quickly. The point I made about the 5 years is simply that it's my judgment, and I could be wrong about this, but even when this feasibility study is done, if in fact it's funded, my sense is that residents are not inclined to want to raise and appropriate or borrow several $1 million for another building in the next probably 5 years anyways, until there's been some reduction in the borrowing costs on the high school. But that's just a judgment call.
It's my reason for asking that question, both of those questions, was I've already indicated that I'd be receptive to allowing the Historic Commission a year to figure out and go do some grant research or whatever, but not if it was going to cost the town $1 more than the town would have spent if we were never having this conversation. If Mr. Hooper said, we got to spend $40,000, we got to replace the roof, we can't go any longer, or if the discussion was, well, all right, we can vote to demolish it, but it's going to have to sit there for 5 years, in which case we're going to have to do some stuff to keep it safe and to refurbish it, I'd say let's get it in front of the town meeting in 2 months and get this thing ripped down. But I'm hearing that we don't have to really spend any more money than we were already going to spend to allow you the time. So that's what I wanted to hear in order to feel confident with my vote. So,
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shampoo. I'd be more than happy to go to the audience. I mean, I don't have a problem spending the time in doing it, and if anybody would love to make a comment. Mr. West. Absolutely you, in a moment. You didn't put your hand up first. Frank put his hand up first. I'm sorry.
Happily retired.
That's why you hesitated to put your hand up. All right, I understand. Frank.
Good evening, gentlemen and ladies. My name is Frank West. I'm a former Wilmington Selectman and also a former member of the Wilmington Historical Commission. Back in 1990, when I joined the Historical Commission under Chairperson happily retired Carolyn Harris, as she says, the first job that we had was to attend a National Register of Historic Places ceremony for the West Schoolhouse. This was in 1990. Back then, the school, as a former building inspector, and I know Mrs. Harris can attend to, the former building inspector, Mr. Russo, said at that time that the only thing holding that place together is paint. And he was aching just to knock that building down. When I got out, and that building stayed in that state for many years. When I joined the historical, when I became a selectman sitting at the table with you folks, I mentioned, why don't we revitalize that building and make it something more than it is? And at the time, the then town manager, Mike Kyra, said, that's great, Frank, we have $250 saved to take care of that building. What we were able to do, in working in partnership with the Shawshene Tech and the state, through Jim Maselli, Representative Maselli, and also State Senator Tarr, was to get $103,000 to revitalize that building. And that building today is now the Veterans Office, and I think, Mr. Semaglia, I don't know if you want to comment on the building or not, but I know that the building was updated as far as the electrical, the plumbing, the septic, new roof, paint, the whole bit. And when we had a subsequent rededication of the building in 2005, and again, that was 9 years ago, that building, we were able to tour the inside, and it was beautiful. So my comment on that is that you can make something more beautiful than it is today, and I think that's the state with the Whitfield. If I may, if I get past this through you, Mike, don't mind? These are pictures of the Foster School in Tewksbury. Now, originally, that was the building, probably built, again, I'm not a, it was built around the same time as the Whitfield. And essentially what they did was that they took the facade, there's more to pass down, Mike, if you would. there's more, that has this facade of the Foster School and the essence of the Foster School, and with it is a modern building with elevators and, you know, all the modern amenities, if you will. And that's something that possibly could be done with the Whitfield. When the library did their feasibility study back in 2004-ish, I know it was found out that there was an 8-inch water main going onto the property. The land is sandy. They said that there's about 3 acres that's buildable out of the, I believe it's 9.75 acres in total. So there is room to build, to add on to that building if so desired, as opposed to just knocking it down and starting over from scratch. One question I'd like to ask Mr. Hooper, if I may. Now, I know it's $42,000, if you will, to re-shingle, you know, re-roof and all that to the building, but could, for reasonably short money, could it be tarped over or something like that so that we could prevent the water from going in, have the building somewhat secured while the Historical Commission does their, you know, whatever they need to do, and hopefully, and give them a year? I mean, could you tarp it over for short money?
Sure, you could top it over. You've seen tops on building, you have to strap them down. It's a very temporary basis. You put your blue elephant, your top on top of that.
But that could last theoretically the year that the Historical Commission would need to to put this, postpone it from this time meeting to the next?
You could put a top on it.
Okay, and basically to answer probably Selectman Shampoo's concern, it sounds like, you know, that we would be spending another dollar, if you will, but it would be probably a far cry from the $42,000 that the Historical Commission or you may be looking at in your budget to actually re-roof the whole structure. The other thing also is that in that backyard of the Whitfield, again, when I sat on that board, what that place looked like, and you guys all know, was a big sand lot that no one really used. And one of the things that was brought forward is that, hey, why don't we revitalize that so it can be used? So what happened was that through the town, and I think through Wilmington Youth Soccer, you have the field that's there today. As far as the additional parking and all that was mentioned by Selectman Newhouse, you know, if you knock the building down, I mean, really what you're probably going to get is another maybe 20 parking spaces or something. What there is that there is a crosswalk that was put in 2005-ish that goes right from the Whitfield to where the registry parking lot is. So there is a safety crosswalk right there, so if people aren't using it, you know, it's kind of shame on them for not using it. But the thing is that, again, I don't want to take up a lot of time here, and I apologize if I'm sounding it, but there are many uses that building could have. You could use the facade of it, add on, if you wanted to make that a combination senior center, and add on for historical integrity uses. Back in 2005, and I know Selectman McCoy was on the board at the time, and I'm not sure, maybe Selectman Newhouse, we actually brought housing people in from Boston to take a look at that with Representative Maselli and State Senator Tarr, and they were interested in having that as some sort of an auxiliary to Deming Way, because at the time they said that they could put in 20, 30 units with a septic design and not have to do like any type of sewage, because there is no central sewage in the property. And what that is that if you look at that general area, basically what you're in is that you're in a neighborhood activity center where you've got the hospital nearby, the trains, the highway, and a wealth of stores and local businesses. So if it was to be used for some sort of a senior purpose, they could do something, you know, it would be in an ideal situation where it's a walkable situation. Am I suggesting that we take the current building with 20 steps and using that as a senior housing with 4 rooms? Absolutely not. But what I'm suggesting is that if it was to be added on to with handicapped accessibility and elevator and all that, it could be used as a building. And the thing is that, you know, I would certainly recommend that you give the Historical Commission a year to do what, you know, to see what they can do, and you know, if they can't do anything in a year, then maybe you guys can say, you know, we'll knock it. As you heard from Mr. Hooper, at least on the roof end, and again, that's just a roof issue. I don't know if obviously the building needs more than just a roof, but at least he could probably get the building secure for a year's time so that a proper assessment could be done through the Historical Commission, through all the town departments, and see what can be used. So I don't know, I mean, that's what I offer to you guys. I don't think there's a reason to knock it down tomorrow. I'm hearing from Mr. Hooper that, you know, it could be at least sheltered, if you will, while they do their study, and for short money.
All right, thank you, Frank. I wanted to give you an opportunity to make your case. Mr.
If I may,
Solagli?
Mr. Chairman, you mentioned the West Schoolhouse, and I obviously am a big fan of the West Schoolhouse and what was done there in 2005 with the help of the tech. And it's a viable office, very busy office right now. It's being used wonderfully. But that was a while ago, and it was $100,000, Frank. You're talking real money with elevators and escalators and all that stuff. And quite frankly, we're talking about aesthetics of a building. Blue tarps on that building, to me, I would not be a fan of. We've had blue tarps in town, we've had blue fences in town, and that's not very good looking to have on a building for a year or a day, Frank. So I think that's kind of a silly an argument as far as tarping it.
And hold on, before I go to Mr. Hooper, I want to make a quick comment. Frank, we're comparing apples to oranges. We're talking a single-story, Shawshene Tech, I was going to mention, was involved. It was $150,000. We're not talking about a two-story building that is in desperate repair. And once again, I can't see spending taxpayers' dollars to bring the roof up, to do this, to do everything, and then eventually, at the end of the day, we're going to tear it down. Mr. Hooper, you want to make a comment?
Yeah, the West School, single-room schoolhouse, also public buildings, did work with the Shawshene Tech and the students.
Yeah.
The other concern I do have about the roof is, again, what's underneath those shingles. You talk about just climbing up there and putting a tarp on it. I don't know if I'd be real secure about sending any of my men up on top of that roof. I don't know how safe those roof boards. I've already had contractors. That's one of the first things they say. This is the shingle. I can't guarantee any of the roof boards underneath, so I wouldn't want to put any of my men up there. Also, how long is that top going to last? It's going to have to be, you got some high winds, even though you have it strapped, you're going to have to replace it again, so there's another risk, and that's going to be additional cost. So I just want to, this is not that
Anybody
easy.
else, Frank? Hold on. Anybody else want to make a comment? Mr. Lincoln, oh, no, I'm sorry, I apologize. Mrs. Harris, floor is yours.
How quickly forget. Just a couple of thoughts. Number one, I agree with you. You're talking apples and oranges, a one-room schoolhouse, a huge classical schoolhouse. However, there is something very much in common, and that's the hard work of the Historical Commission in getting a job done, which we have for as long as I was on the commission, and that goes back, as we know, to probably prehistoric days, okay? The commission is dedicated to preservation and conservation. When this came up at the last meeting, in all honesty, it should have been tabled and put on an agenda and the Historical Commission notified, because it was truly an awful thing for them to learn about it in the newspaper, which many of them did. What they're asking is simple and basic, and you know the track record of the Historical Commission. They're simply asking that whatever the study is that the town manager has recommended, they want it done just as every other building is done, no extra money, not one extra dollar, Mr. Shampoo. And then they'll take a look at what comes out of that study. We've always been, I think, and this board is no different than it has been in the past. We have new people, yes, but we have the same mission. I think that these people will look at whatever that study is and make a recommendation, which is in the best interest of the town and what preservation can possibly go on. That's all they're asking for, is time. And, you know, in terms of respecting this commission, I think that's a legitimate thing. And town meeting, you get the money for that study, how long is that study going to take? In the meantime, the commission can go on and take a look at viable alternatives, you know, and bring those forth if there are any, if it is possible. You know, we have had a pretty good track record of raising money in grants and so forth. And I look at what happened at the Swain School. From the very beginning, the Historical Commission was involved in that decision. And that was a real hard decision for the Historical Commission to make. But we went through that building, we talked to the architects, we did everything possible. And in the end, we felt as a commission at that time, that building cannot be saved, it's not in the best interest of Wilmington. I really think that the board should look at the commission and trust them to do a good job, to take a look at the situation, and then, without spending a dollar on it, if it can be done, this commission will find a way to do it. If it can't be done, this commission is going to make a recommendation as well. But I know it's very difficult with the Swain School, but we were there every step of the way. And this is not the case. So I feel really bad about that. And then maybe that's why I drove 150 miles and not only to be here tonight, So I don't know what else to say. As far as money and so forth, there are a lot of figures floating around. Jeff has a warrant article for that study. Let them do the study and treat the Whitfield like any other building, and then you have something to move on. And in the meantime, you have a very hard-working commission that would appreciate your support and at least giving them a little time in order to move ahead and do what's in the best interest of the town of Wilmington.
Right, thank you, Mrs. Howe. I appreciate you making that 150-mile trip, and by the way, you look very Irish tonight. Mr. Lincolnfelter.
George Lincoln, Copper Street. I'm of a different opinion. I think you should allow the time that the Historical Commission is asking for. I'm coming from a more antagonistic point, I'll be quick though, that I think the town should reflect on itself as to how we got where we're at with the Swain School and the Whitfield School. And I also look currently at having gone to school at the Wildwood and the North and watching those buildings deteriorate. I don't think the town, it's not a specific problem of the town not maintaining the buildings, it's that the town, in my opinion, doesn't invest money to maintain the buildings. The roof should have been done 20 years ago or something. At the Wildwood School, I watched the fascia boards deteriorate where there's rodent holes and things in them. Maybe not currently, but in the past. So my antagonistic comment is that the town should be more self-reflective on how we got here tonight, and not do it again in the future.
I appreciate the comments. In fact, we went to school together, Wildwood Street, North Intermediate, Wilmington
It was a
High.
lot better shape in those
Well, I'll
days.
tell you, I think the town has done a decent job in maintaining the buildings, our public schools, and done a decent job. I know we're the difference of opinion. Anybody else? No one else from the audience? And I will go to you.
Thank you, and I thank Carolyn for coming here and giving her support, always well-spoken. And Frank, thank you as well, always a strong advocate for the commission and the work that we do. And I was reminded tonight that George Hooper was on the Historical Commission at one point. We actually served together. Yes. Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. And he was a wonderful supporter then, and he is, we've worked together for many years, and he's always a phone call away and always very responsive to getting us into the buildings that we need to get into, or having a discussion about work that we think needs to be done and is a priority. So I truly appreciate his work and his efforts and his willing to help us along here. And, we've asked this question before, the different color tarps than blue, and we all know that there are black and brown. And so we don't have to worry about the blue elephant. Maybe it's a different color elephant. But, I'll just state my case again. We're just asking for time. It's not an unreasonable request. And I appreciate, once again, the return phone calls and the attempts to communicate with me, and look forward to what you have to say, one way or the other.
I know we've had a lot of comments, we've spent quite a bit of time. I take some of the comments that were made here by the board and talking about that we have the Joint Finance Committee meeting that will come up where you'd be able to state your case. The board would be able to give their comments. And then I look at town meeting as essentially theoretically the same composition of this room overlaid into a town meeting setting, plus additional residents to be able to weigh in on that. I'm a big proponent of it, seeing the town meeting floor regardless of where the vote goes. I have my personal opinions, which I've shared with you. What is the biggest concern about seeing it hit the town meeting floor, where you would have the opportunity to educate in the same way you've educated this board, but do it across a broader residence base? Can you articulate your position on that?
I can. As we all know, and I've attended many town meetings in my years here, and sometimes we struggle to get a quorum, and you know that, and it takes us a while to get participants at the town meeting. So if we don't have the opportunity to educate the community, there's not going to be enough people there to perhaps weigh in on our side, or to have a very healthy conversation about this and a very healthy debate about this. So additional time will allow us to educate the public, and we all know how important education is. We all know. Nobody wants to make an ignorant decision or an uneducated decision. So my concern is we're not going to have enough people at town meeting in this short a period of time to have the healthy debate that needs to occur. And I know there are other mechanisms to thwart the warrant article if it does go through tonight, with the demolition of the Whitfield included. I know I can present my case to the FinCom, and I know I can move to amend the warrant at town meeting. But again, it's just simply not enough time to reach out to however many thousands, hopefully tens of thousands of voters will get at town meeting. It's just not enough time. And as you know, it's a busy time of year. Soccer season's full underway, lacrosse season's full underway, track is underway. There's not a lot of people interested in coming to a town meeting on a Saturday and having this debate. They'd rather be at the soccer fields. So I'd like to go to soccer fields and talk to the parents and educate them on this building. I would be there with the table and some historical information on the building, and educate some of the community participants. But it's just not enough time between now and then to do that. That's my concern.
All right, thank you. I know this is a sensitive issue, and I wanted to give everyone an opportunity to speak. We've been on the agenda for well over an hour, and I had no problem doing that. I want to let you know that. And once again, I appreciate you being here, and once again, I know it's a sensitive issue, and I know you took an oath to preserve and to help and to educate, and I respect that. And that's all I really need to say, and I want to give you this opportunity. And thank you for coming here and being here
Thank you,
tonight.
Mr. Chair.
Mrs. Harris, thank you for traveling 150 miles. Thank you. Have a nice night. Thank you.
Nice to see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. The next appointment, agenda item, is Board of Selectmen discussion, place an article on warrant to demolish Whitfield School. That's the next item on the agenda.
Yes, so as I indicated at the last Selectmen's meeting, what I would have ready for the board this evening is two separate warrants. One warrant will contain all the articles that have been previously discussed, absent an article to demolish the Whitfield. The second warrant will contain those same articles as well as an article to demolish the Whitfield, just because, as you know, the board needs to vote to sign the warrant this evening.
Thank you. Any discussion from the board?
Well, I mean, I think we've had plenty of discussion. We've had an opportunity to, make our position known, and depending on how the vote goes, the discussion will continue.
No, I agree. I don't have a problem bringing it to the town meeting floor, and once again, there is a forum, people will be educated, people will be able to make a decision, and I believe that we will get a quorum, because we've always had. The last meeting, we had a quorum instantaneously. It happened immediately. So if anybody wants any questions, comments, or anybody want to make a motion?
I suppose, I'd like to make the motion that we put forth a warrant to town meeting absent an article asking for the demolition of the Whitfield School for this year.
Is there a second? All right, the motion fails because there's a lack of a second. Is there another offer of another motion?
I move that the board insert the proposed warrant article into the town meeting warrant as presented by the manager in his memorandum.
There's a motion. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second by Selectman O'Connell. All those in favor? The vote is 4. All those opposed? The vote is 4 in favor with 1 opposition, Selectman Shampoo. All right, thank you. All right, Board of Selectmen discussion, review a proposed town meeting warrant, and I'll leave that to the TM, the town manager.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, there was a memorandum to the board just outlining what is being put before you this evening. One of the changes being the addition of the Whitfield School article to demolish, as previously noted. There were two other changes that I would propose the board consider this evening. One is Article 23, which was in the draft warrant that was reviewed previously, was an article to establish a stabilization account for other post-employment benefits, and in fact, the article should have been written to say to transfer available funds to an account that already existed, because there has been an account of that name since 2009. It was voted at the 2009 annual town meeting. So the warrant that you have before you this evening for signature modifies the language to simply say that the request is to transfer from available funds or borrow an amount to add to the other post-employment benefits. The second article, which is an add, and I intended to include this in the warrant previously, is an article that would request to transfer the unexpended balance from the high school feasibility study to be appropriated for use in the high school construction, design and construction. So if you recall back when the high school project was first being contemplated, there was $1.125 million that was appropriated at town meeting for the purpose of conducting the original feasibility study. That work obviously was completed, and the amount that remains is approximately $90,000 in that feasibility study account. Subsequent to that, the article was prepared to raise and appropriate or borrow funds for the construction, design and construction of the high school. And at the time, Mike Kyra, the town manager, and John Foskett had some discussions with the MSBA about the language to be used for that article, and essentially they went by the MSBA language. Unfortunately, the article did not include language to transfer, receive money from the feasibility study. So at this point in time, it came to my attention that we had money in the feasibility study that was unexpended, and we don't have any particular use for that money at the moment, but I think it would be advantageous to transfer that money if the town meeting sees fit and make it available in the event that there's a need for it. If there's no need for it at the end of the high school project, then it would just go back to the town.
That makes sense.
So those are the changes.
All right.
That's it?
That's
All
it,
set?
yep.
All right, communications. Jeff, want to bring us through communications? I'm sorry.
Just to...
I'm sorry, we put it under our board to consider item to
Yes.
sign the warrant. Never mind,
Right.
sorry.
Thank you. All right.
Under communications, as we've discussed, I had presented the board with a memorandum just outlining the circumstances of the Whitfield School. Also, there's a memorandum which I just referred to that addresses the revisions to the town warrant. There's a memo to the board that addresses the meeting that Chairman McCoy and Selectmen Shampoo and I had with John Foskett about the legal services, and it was agreed, I think, by all parties that the arrangement that we currently have is working. The John Foskett was agreeable to the retainer amount of $300,000, which has been proposed in the fiscal 15 budget. It's actually 255 to be specific, to be raised and appropriated, and then another 7,500 for legal expenses. And then, in addition to that, 45,000 is assessed to the water department, so that brings it up to the 300. As a means of trying to make sure we're maintaining a measure of control on legal expenses, it's agreed that we'll continue to make sure that we're only using counsel when absolutely necessary. Department heads, as has been the practice in the past, will run potential legal issues through me before we consult with town council, and we'll endeavor to make sure that we have a full package of information prepared to send to council when a legal issue comes up, so that they're focused on the legal merits as opposed to information gathering. So that's the intent of that memo. We have a letter from Scott Grant, representing the Wilmington 4th of July Committee. This one I'll read. As you're aware, on March 5th, 2014, the 4th of July Committee scheduled a meeting with the Wilmington-based nonprofit organizations that participate in the Fun on the 4th celebration. At this meeting, the committee requested input from the organizations as to what their membership wished to see occur in 2014 in light of your decision to prohibit fireworks display at the town common area in 2014. Based upon the reliance upon your assurances that a good faith effort will be made to return the traditional celebration, including fireworks and a carnival, to the town common location in 2015, the nonprofit organizations have requested that the 4th of July Committee work to stage a 2014 celebration at the Aleppo Shriners property on Fordham Road. The committee has agreed to do so in order to provide the organizations with the opportunity to raise funds and to support their community programs and present a celebration that we hope the community will support. It is the consensus of the committee members and the nonprofit organizations that in order for the celebration to be a viable one, it must include a carnival and fireworks display. As such, in order to have a celebration in 2014, we'll be looking for the Wilmington Fire Department for approval of fireworks display, and we will be applying to the Board of Appeals for a special permit for inclusion of a carnival. We also anticipate requesting permission from the Board of Selectmen for use of the town common area at a minimum the morning of July 4, 2014, for the purpose of having some of our traditional Family Day events, including the doll carriage and bicycle parade, games, and races. It remains the position of the committee that the Aleppo Shriners property is not the preferred venue for the Fun on the 4th celebration, other than as a temporary one-year solution. We trust that, as was stated by the Board of Selectmen members during the December 16, 2013 meeting, the process of evaluating options for 2015 and beyond will begin in June of this year. We further trust that the discussions will include a return of all the events to the town common area. We would request that these discussions also include a reevaluation of the proposed design of the parking lot of the new high school to allow the area to accommodate the carnival in 2015 and beyond. While we, as always, recognize the time, effort, and financial commitment to the celebration made by town officials and personnel and by our fellow residents, for 33 years, the Wilmington 4th of July Committee has presented the events that are included in the celebration without direct funding from the town of Wilmington. The celebration has traditionally been funded by monies raised through the generosity of local organizations and businesses and through the carnival. It is our intention to fund the 2014 celebration in the same manner, and as such, we recommend that the proposed town meeting warrant article calling for an appropriation of $15,000 be withdrawn, or that the funds be used to offset the town's costs associated with the celebration. In anticipation of successful organizing a celebration in 2014, the committee wishes to thank the numerous Wilmington-based nonprofit organizations that participate each year in the Aleppo Shriners for their generous offer to use their facility on Fordham Road. We have correspondence from Paula McShane Lambert, treasurer at the Shawshene Regional Voc Tech. This is basically advising, it's directed to the chairman, it's advising the board that the Shawshene Tech's total FY 2015 budget is $26,960,185, and the assessment to the various towns in the district is $20,189,074. Wilmington's assessment is $3,767,358. We have correspondence, actually a board to consider, correspondence from Patricia Romano, Vice President of the Wilmington High School Band Parents. The Wilmington Sons of Italy and the Wilmington High School Band Parents are requesting permission to use the municipal parking lot on Middlesex Ave across from the town common for the second annual flea market fundraiser to support both organizations. The event will be held on Saturday, May 3rd, and Sunday, May 4th, from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., with setup and cleanup an hour before and after each day. Provides contact information. Thank you in advance for your continued support of our organization.
No issues on those days for the town?
No, we have no issues.
Everything is fine. Is there a motion to approve relative to the comments of the town manager?
So moved.
Is there a second? Motion made by Selectman Samaglia, second by Selectman Newhouse. All those in favor? And it's unanimous. Thank you.
Very good.
Then on the board to consider, this would be closing and signing the warrant for the annual town meeting, so you would want to take a vote.
All right, is there a motion to close and sign the warrant for the annual town meeting as described by the town manager?
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Selectman Newhouse, second by Selectman Samaglia. All those in favor? And it's unanimous again. Thank you. Public comments. Seeing that there's no public comments, any new business or committee reports? And I'll start with Mr. Newhouse.
There is a meeting Wednesday night for the, what I'm referring to as a screening committee for the school superintendent search, so certainly be able to report back to the board on that. And good luck to the high school boys hockey team that hopefully right now is leading in their game over at the Songas.
Thank you. Very good. I was gonna buy that. Anybody else?
Just wanted to let the board know that on February 27th, we had our first public workshop for the Yuntile Farm Development Committee, and I would estimate about 65 people from the town came out collectively with the board. We probably had about 80 people in the room. We had Waterfield Design go through a comprehensive presentation, and then we broke out into small working groups, and we had probably presentation teams, roughly about 5 to 6 people. We actually gave actual drawn-to-scale plans of the Yuntile property, gave them actual regulation size ball fields and play areas and things like that. They literally cut them out, pasted them, and actually gave individual 3 to 4 minute presentations. We asked all the groups to articulate any concerns, ideas, names. It was very interesting, some of the names that came forward, and I don't want to prematurely share any of that. There'll be other instances to do so, but I think for our first public event, we were pleased as a committee as to how well it went. Certainly, there'll be other workshops that will be available for the community to participate in. They will not be a reiteration of the past workshop, but more a continuation of the project timeline and as we move forward with concept design. So we're encouraged with that. I wanted to also bring to the board's attention for important dates. It's not listed here, and I just wanted to add that tomorrow night, Tuesday, March 11th at 6 o'clock, we have our follow-up meeting to that design workshop. So we look forward to bringing future updates to the board, and just wanted to thank Selectman Shampoo for being there and participating as well. And certainly we'll have more updates overall for the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Hearing from you, Judy, it sounds like it's really going well. Mr. Shampoo?
Yeah, I wanted to really compliment Judy and her whole committee. That meeting last week was actually fun, to be honest with you. It was, as she described, the map, kind of a Google Earth photograph of it, of the whole property with delineations for where the buildable space is, where the wetlands are, et cetera. And they gave us little colorform cutouts to put on there, and it was fun. You had the luxury of being able to just think without thinking about budget necessarily. It's just kind of brainstorm a little bit and throw things on there. And it was just, enjoyable to be able to work in that work group environment with people from throughout the town who maybe you see but don't have a relationship with. And you could see that the conversation was spirited, it was fun, and it was engaging. And everyone there, I think, felt sincerely like they were contributing and being a part of this process. So kudos to the entire committee and great leadership there, Selectman O'Connell. I wanted to also say that I had the great pleasure of working with Mr. McCoy and Mr. Hall in meeting with Town Council. Was it, I guess, last week? I don't know, dates kind of slip away. But when we met, it was a substantive conversation, and out of it, I felt emboldened that the town is continuing to be well-served by a very adept town council, and that we are able to maintain our flat fee arrangement with them. Albeit we as a community, as administration, will endeavor to be a little bit more efficient in terms of the nature of the information that goes to town council, which will make them more efficient in responding to our needs. So all's well that ends well. There's always opportunity to be more efficient and more diligent in working with our colleagues. So I guess I'm glad to be able to say that we came out of that conversation without any negative vibes or any negative impact on the town. So that's really it there, and go Wildcats.
Thank you. And Jeff, if you could quickly bring us through important dates. Lou's in desperate need of his wife's chicken soup.
Okay. Finance Committee, we've got a meeting on the 18th. This is the joint public hearing with the warrant and annual town meeting. Planning Board will also participate March 20th, registration deadline for rookies T-ball. March 24 is the next Board of Selectmen's meeting. April 3rd, Wilmington High School Building Committee, next meeting. That is a meeting that we're anticipating going to do a site visit. April 4th, last day to register to vote at the annual town meeting elections. Clerk's office will be open from 8:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. April 15th, rabies clinic, public buildings, noon to 2.
Motion to adjourn? Second. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.